Jennifer Harris disappeared from Bonham, Texas on Mother's Day 2002. The secrets in the Jennifer Harris case have been hidden for 20 years.
When someone disappears, you have to look at who would benefit from their disappearance.
What happened to Jennifer Harris? And who is responsible for her death? Coming May 10th, Final Days on Earth, Season 2, The Life and Death of Jennifer Harris. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 264 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, what's going on with you, man?
Hey, man, I'm doing okay. How about you?
Doing very well.
Good.
You and I just got done recording a Patreon episode that would have dropped Saturday night on Belle Gibson.
We did.
An influencer from Australia who lied about beating cancer using non-traditional approaches. She amassed a pretty big following, and some people believed her so much that they stopped their cancer treatments. She also reportedly pocketed a bunch of money she said was going to charities.
Yeah, it's not okay.
No, but it was an interesting episode. Speaking of Patreon, let's go ahead and give our shout outs. We had Ron Lund.
Hey, Ron.
Lee Odin.
What's going on, Odin?
Karen Himmel-Heck.
Well, what's going on, Himmel-Heck?
Trish.
Good old Trish.
Becca H.
Hey, Becca.
Steve James Tucker.
What's going on, Steve?
Evan La.
La? Okay.
Eric Collins.
Hey, Eric.
Vaish K.
What's going on, Kay?
Anthony Wood.
Hey, Wood.
Katie Hooper.
What's going on, Hooper?
Tommy Hogg Sather.
Yeah, I think it's Sather. Like
okay,
that.
I got you.
Yeah.
Andrea.
Hey, Andrea.
Elizabeth Jasmine.
I like that. Hey, Elizabeth.
Kaylin Landry.
Hey, Kaylin.
Megan Arntz.
Well, thank you, Arntz.
Eric Koger.
What's going on, Eric?
And Star G.
And there is the G.
And if we go back into the vault, Gibbs, this week we selected Joyce Loveless.
Hey, Joyce, appreciate that.
So thanks to everyone. We also had some PayPal donations from William Onafrak.
Well, thank you, Onafrak.
Catherine Dugan.
Hey, Dugan.
And Richard Lawrence.
Thank you, Lawrence.
So thanks to everyone. Gibbs, right now on TCAT, we have an episode out on Ernest Ingenito. This was a man who shot 9 of his wife's family members in a rampage, killing 5, but he had to go to 3 different houses to do it. And then later argue about whether the murders were premeditated and all this stuff. So, definitely check that episode out. All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I'm ready.
Today, we are talking about the Alphabet murders. This is a pretty big, pretty well-known unsolved case. It's a case that people have been asking us to do for a number of years. So now's the time. Between 1971 and 1973, 3 young girls were abducted and murdered in Rochester, in upstate New York. They were 10-year-old Carmen Colon, 11-year-old Wanda Walkowicz, and 11-year-old Michelle Maenza. What made the case unique and gave it its unusual name was that the first letter of each of the victims' first and last names were the same. Each victim was also dumped in a location in the Rochester area, which corresponded to these particular letters. And that's where you get the moniker, the Alphabet murders. Numerous suspects have come up on the radar over the years. There's even a theory that not all the murders are even linked to begin with. Regardless, the killer or killers remain on the loose to this day, despite some claiming to know who is responsible for at least one of the slayings.
But you're right. This is a case we've been looking at for years. We've talked about it on some other cases too. So
yeah, it's tied in with some other unsolved cases that we've talked about. Not sure why we waited so long to do it, but it's here now.
Glad we did.
Carmen Colon was born in 1961 in Rochester to her parents, Justin Iano and Guillermina. Soon after, the family moved to Puerto Rico, where they stayed until Carmen was 5 years old. That's when the family moved back to Rochester. Carmen moved in with her grandparents on Brown Street in the Bull's Head neighborhood when her parents split up. But everyone stayed in contact, and Carmen's parents still lived nearby. She didn't speak a lot of English, but she was said, Gibbs, to be a happy and friendly girl. Carmen's family was very protective of her. She wasn't allowed to play outside of her yard or with kids she didn't know. By the early 1970s, Guillermina was in a relationship with Justin Iano's brother Miguel. Carmen called him Uncle Miguel.
So it's kind of different, right? I mean, I know it happens. It can happen, but...
It can, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a little odd.
Yeah.
It's a very strange family dynamic. I'll put it that way. You know, you're married to someone, you split up, and then you start dating that person's brother. Okay.
It's a way to keep it all in the family.
I got you. Yeah, I got you. On the afternoon of November 16th, 1971, Guillermina visited her parents and daughter. She asked Carmen to run to the local drugstore located on West Main Street in Rochester to fill a prescription. Now, normally, Carmen's grandfather always went with her. But on this day, Carmen begged to go alone, and her grandparents agreed to let her. When Carmen got to the drugstore, she was told the prescription would take a few minutes to fill. All of a sudden, she told the store owner, I gotta go. Around 4:20 p.m., Carmen was seen getting into a vehicle parked near the drugstore, but Carmen never made it home. And as the hours passed with no sign of the young girl, her family became more and more worried. At 7:50 p.m., they reported her missing to the Rochester Police Department. 2 days later, on November 18th, two teen boys were riding their bikes near the village of Churchville on the outskirts of Rochester, not far from Interstate 490. The pair came across what they thought was a broken doll lying in a ditch. It turned out that it was Carmen's body. According to the Detroit Free Press, she was wearing only her sweater, socks, and sneakers. In a culvert around 300 feet away was her coat. Carmen had been dumped about 12 miles from where she'd last been seen. Her autopsy revealed that she'd been raped. She sustained a premortem fracture to her skull and one to her vertebrae, and her body bore the signs of fingernail scratches. Her cause of death was determined to be manual strangulation.
Yeah, keep in mind, she was only 10 years old. This animal, this person that did this to her, raped and killed a 10-year-old, a little girl.
11-year-old Wanda Walkowicz lived on Avenue D in Rochester with her mother, Joyce, and sisters Rita and Michelle. She was born on August 4th, 1961. Wanda was said to have been a very energetic kid. She loved the outdoors and playing around the nearby Genesee River. The Walkowicz family had already known tragedy. According to the Democrat and Chronicle, in June 1967, when Wanda was only 5 years old, her 30-year-old father, Richard, died from a heart attack. 17 months after Carmen was murdered, in the late afternoon of April 2nd, 1973, Wanda's mother, Joyce, told her to run to the local deli on Conkey Avenue on Rochester's east side to get some groceries. Now, it wasn't the first time Wanda had gone to this deli alone. She made her way there safely, and she bought tuna fish, milk, cupcakes, and cat food. The owner saw Wanda leave the store at around 5:15 p.m. with a bag as she began walking back home along Conkey Avenue. But Wanda never showed up back at home. At 8 p.m., Joyce reported her daughter missing. Now, police quickly rallied to search for Wanda. Around 50 detectives searched several square miles around the deli, around Wanda's home and near the Genesee River, where she was known to have spent a lot of time.
Yeah, but there was no sign of Wanda.
No sign of Wanda, but 50 detectives, Gibbs, that is a lot.
It is a lot.
That's a lot of resources devoted very, very quickly. And, honestly, that's what you want to see.
Yeah. And for the time frame, knowing this was in the 70s, early 70s, I'm actually impressed that they came out that quick.
Yeah, just the fact that they jumped on it quickly. We're not hearing, some of the lines that we hear in many cases. Oh, I'm sure she'll be back, or you have to wait X amount of time. Now, she was only 11 years old. So I think you have to, kind of keep that in mind as well. Officers conducted door-to-door inquiries and discovered that Wanda had been seen by several residents just before she vanished. One person saw her walking just north of Avenue B, trying to manage the bag of groceries. 3 kids in Wanda's class at school also saw her. They said she was trying to get a better hold of the bag while holding it against the fence. So, from these sightings, Gibbs, I'm taking it that she was struggling with the weight of this bag, how to carry it, and so on.
Yeah. Been there before. We had to, the bag was like uncomfortable to carry. You had to reposition it, so sometimes you lean up against something to adjust that bag.
And again, she's 11. She is an 11-year-old girl.
Yeah.
But the kids also said that they recalled seeing a brown vehicle drive past Wanda around this same time. So they didn't find anything on that first day. The next day, the search resumed. It wasn't long before Joyce received the news that no parent wants to hear. Around 7 miles outside Rochester, a police officer searching the base of a hillside near an access road to Route 104 in Webster found Wanda's body at around 10:15 a.m. near a rest stop. She was fully clothed. From the way that her body was positioned, police suspected she'd been thrown from a moving vehicle and then rolled down the embankment to the bottom of the hill. Wanda's autopsy revealed that, like Carmen Colon, she too had been raped. There were traces of semen and foreign pubic hair on her body. Wanda had eaten custard in the hours before she died, but Joyce told the police they didn't have any at home. It was theorized that Wanda fought for her life because she sustained numerous defensive injuries. Now, even though Wanda had been found fully dressed, it was theorized that her clothes had been removed at some stage before her murder and that her killer had redressed her. They also found white cat fur on her clothing, despite the fact that the Walkowicz family cat was not white. Wanda had been strangled from behind, and it was determined that it was performed with a ligature, maybe something like a belt.
So we're seeing some similarities.
Obviously, this was complete devastation for Joyce. I think on a number of fronts. I mean, first and foremost, your daughter's dead. So you've got to process that. But then I think, when you learn about some of the other things, she was thrown from a moving car and rolled down the hill like somebody would throw out a can of soda.
Right.
She was discarded that way. The sexual assault.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. It's a lot to process.
It is.
And we mentioned it, right? Several years earlier, she'd lost her husband at a young age. Now one of her daughters had been murdered in the most terrible of circumstances.
Yeah, it had to be tough on Joyce to lose your husband and then just a few years later to lose your little girl. That'd be difficult, extremely difficult.
And we really don't know how much family support she had, near her, around her. Was she having to kind of go through this alone? We don't know that. 7 months later, close to Thanksgiving weekend of 1973, 11-year-old Michelle Maenza headed off to school. Michelle was born on November 28th, 1961. She too lived in Rochester with her mother, Carolyn, and 2 sisters on Webster Crescent. Carolyn was separated from Michelle's father, Christopher, who lived nearby with the couple's 2 sons. November 26th was the first day. Carolyn had let Michelle walk home from school alone, but Michelle failed to show up when she was expected. Carolyn reported her daughter missing that evening. When inquiries were made with Michelle's classmates about her last movements, they told police they last saw her around 3:20 p.m. According to WHEC News, Michelle walked alone to Goodman Plaza near her school to collect a purse Carolyn had left inside a store in the plaza a couple of days earlier. One of Michelle's uncles saw her at the plaza and offered to give her a ride home, but she declined. Michelle's father, Christopher, told News 10 NBC, "She's a very sensitive girl and she likes to look for friends. She wouldn't run away from home." And Gibbs, as we're talking about these families, we have to talk about Michelle's mother, Carolyn.
Sure.
Makes the decision that she's finally going to let Michelle walk home alone from school.
Which is always a big decision for moms and dads.
Sure. It's a lot of freedom. There's some danger. We know that. I can imagine Michelle was probably pestering her for some time.
Sure.
Hey, Mom, other kids get to walk home. I really want to walk home. We know kids want to grow up, on a timeline that's much faster than what we would like for them to, grow up. But the second guessing, right, of that decision, along with the grief that we know is going to come here in a little bit, that had to be extremely tough on Carolyn. I made the decision. I let her do it.
Sure.
And now she's gone.
My fault.
Yeah. We're not saying it is, but I think what you're saying is that has to be what's running through her mind.
Oh, of course.
And I agree 100%. 2 days after Michelle was last seen alive, her body was found lying face down, fully clothed, in a ditch alongside Eddy Road in the village of Macedon, approximately 15 miles from Rochester. Her coat was found a quarter of a mile away. It would have been Michelle's 12th birthday. Her autopsy revealed that she had been raped and sustained extensive blunt force trauma to her body. Like Wanda, Michelle's killer had strangled her from behind using a ligature. But in this case, the ligature was thought to be a rope instead of a belt. And my thought, Gibbs, is that those two would be very distinctly different patterns. Like it would be pretty easy, I would think, to tell the difference between a rope and a belt.
Yeah, I would think so as well.
You're going to get a much different pattern on the neck. A partial palm print was retrieved from her neck and a fingerprint from one of her boots. The medical examiner found white cat fur and semen on Michelle's clothing, which was also on her underwear. According to the Post-Standard, Michelle sustained bruising to her neck and upper arms. Inside one of her clenched hands was leaf debris consistent with that seen growing in the same area where her body was found. Her stomach contents showed that she'd eaten around an hour before she died. A meal consisting of a hamburger and onions.
So another murder that's similar to the other two.
There are definitely some similarities. Now, there are some differences, but I think you'd have to say there are more similarities than there are differences in the murders. But 3 murders of little girls. Each of the murders obviously appalled the public, but for 3 to happen with such similar circumstances during a 2-year period, that's scary to a community.
Yeah.
You have very similar victimology. This is the type of stuff that's going to put a community on edge and should. Rochester residents wondered who would be next and when and who was out there doing this. To me, Gibbs, this is the kind of stuff that makes you clamp down on your children's activities.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you got to be concerned.
You're not going anywhere. I'm not letting you out of my sight. 3 little girls have been raped and murdered in a 2-year span, you're going to be right here with me. I'm keeping an eye on you.
Yeah. Until the police find out who did this, I don't want you going anywhere.
Yeah, there's not going to be any trips to the park. I don't even want you to run out to the ice cream truck. True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try, and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare. So it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at progressive.com to join the over 27 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary on how you buy. Oh, Giz, man, you know I love that sound. I get the biggest kick out of it. It's the sound of another sale on Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big business. So upstarts, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. We've been using Shopify to sell our podcast merch for probably about 4 years now. And once we started using Shopify, the process became so easy. I love how Shopify has the tools and resources that make it easy for any business to succeed from down the street to around the globe. Shopify allows you to reach customers online and across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integrations and apps, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more. It's more than a store. Shopify grows with you. Go to shopify.com/unsolved, all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/unsolved right now. Shopify.com/unsolved. So let's touch a little bit more on the murder of Carmen Colon. According to the New York Times, in the days after Carmen disappeared, a detail emerged that suggested her life could have been saved. Around 50 minutes after Carmen left the drugstore, people driving along Interstate 490 saw something which should have struck them as extremely troubling. Just after 5 p.m., a young girl, naked from the waist down, was reported to be seen running along the interstate. She was running away from a dark-colored Ford Pinto hatchback, which was reversing. The girl was crying and waving her arms to attract the attention of passing motorists, but no one stopped.
And from what I read, it sounded like this was a very busy freeway, and we're talking about dozens and dozens of vehicles.
Not just one or two people.
No.
This was a lot of people. I don't know how many, but a lot of people saw this and made the conscious decision that, hey, I'm not going to stop and see what's going on. Gibbs, if you see a 10 or 11-year-old girl, you know that's a very young girl running alongside a busy road, naked from the waist down. There is something really bad happening, and that girl needs help.
Absolutely.
And anyone who didn't stop should be ashamed of themselves. Sure. I'm just going to say it right now. I get sometimes people don't want to get involved in other people's business. And when you're talking about, let's say, adults having a spat or whatever, I get it. You don't want to step in. You don't know the context of what's going on. But when you see a very young girl who is in obvious distress, that's the time to intervene.
Oh, yeah. Somebody should have done something.
A witness later told police they saw the driver of the Pinto get out of the car and lead the girl back to the vehicle. And as everyone later discovered, that girl was Carmen. Investigators looked into Carmen's family to see if anyone possibly could have harmed her. When police spoke to her relatives, they discovered that only weeks before her murder, her 24-year-old uncle Miguel had purchased a Ford Pinto. When officers searched his vehicle, they found a doll belonging to Carmen, but this was explained away because Miguel regularly drove Carmen around. I think the one thing that really piqued investigators was that, when they were searching the vehicle, they noticed that it was immaculate. It had recently received a very deep cleaning.
Which is always a concern after somebody goes missing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not to say that people don't clean their cars. They do. But you always have to question it when a car is cleaned very, very thoroughly right after someone is murdered or someone goes missing.
The timing is suspicious.
Yeah, sure. Well, and then when they found out that the car lot that sold Miguel the vehicle hadn't cleaned the car, then they knew it could have only been cleaned by Miguel. As police continued their inquiries, they learned Miguel had suddenly left the country. Within just a matter of days after Carmen's murder, he hopped on a plane to Puerto Rico. The reason Miguel gave a friend for his abrupt departure was he had done something wrong in Rochester. Okay, now you're really not looking good.
That's going to spark some interest by the police.
Yeah, no, there's no way around it. It wasn't until late November, after Carmen's funeral, that a pair of girls' pants were found near the service road close to where the girl was seen trying to flee from her captor. A $2,500 reward was announced by the Times-Union and the Democrat and Chronicle newspapers for any information leading to the arrest and conviction of Carmen's killer. According to Medium.com, Rochester businesses contributed to the amount offered, increasing it to over $6,000.
That's a lot of money back then.
It is. It's a good-sized reward.
Yeah.
In the early 1970s, local police spoke to hundreds of people, including potential suspects they thought could have been involved. But as happens in every unsolved case, eventually resources start to drop off on a particular case. They had diminished quite a bit. In Carmen's case, by Christmas of 1971, but several 30-foot by 12-foot billboards were erected at various points near expressways in the Rochester area in early 1972. The billboards appealed for information about Carmen's murder, asking the public to contact a hotline number. Some new tips came in, but nothing meaningful.
Well, at least they're trying to keep it out in the public, right, with the billboards, so people don't forget.
But officers didn't give up on Miguel Colon. In March 1972, detectives traveled to San Juan to interview him, but due to the media attention in Puerto Rico, Miguel didn't hang around, and he went on the run. But eventually, he decided that he just couldn't run forever. So Miguel turned himself in on March 26th. He agreed to return to the U.S. with detectives so that they could continue their investigation. When the police finally spoke to Miguel, he had no alibi for the day of Carmen's murder, but all they had was circumstantial evidence, Gibbs. And, obviously that was not enough. So without any direct evidence implicating Miguel, police had no choice but to let him go without charging him.
This guy got lucky if he had anything to do with her murder.
Well, yeah, definitely. If he was involved, then he did get lucky. I mean, you look at what made police so suspicious of him, it didn't make him look great, right? The doll's in there. Yeah, but he drove her around a lot.
Right.
So she could have left it in his car. He cleaned his car very thoroughly. He could have just made the decision that he wanted to clean his car. When you add it all up, it doesn't make him look good. The taking off to Puerto Rico, the running when police come to question him, but none of it or all of it together is going to be enough to present to a jury and get a conviction, right? They didn't even have enough to charge him. Someone else who came to the attention of police during this time was Rochester resident James Barber. According to the Democrat and Chronicle, James worked in the same neighborhood where Carmen lived. Around the time of her murder, instead of clocking in at work using the automated punch card system, James wrote his work hours on his time card. And then just after Carmen's murder, he quickly moved away from the area. And it was said, Gibbs, that he was in such a hurry that he left his belongings behind in his apartment.
Looks suspicious.
Sure. Police later discovered that he was wanted in Ohio on an outstanding warrant for assault and sodomy of a 15-year-old girl. So obviously this guy doesn't look great either. The problem is there's just not a whole lot of information out there about James. And I think when you see that, it's pretty safe to say that police never found any evidence directly linking him to Carmen's murder. Obviously, if they did, they would have charged him. There would be a lot more information. But just like I said about Miguel, this is suspicious stuff, but it's very circumstantial. You could make the argument that, he wrote in his time on his time card because he wasn't there to punch in.
Right.
And he had to write it in later or before or whatever.
But it does look suspicious because it's on that day, right?
Sure.
Any other day, you'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
But it happened on that day.
And then the move, the quick move, the fact that someone leaves a lot of their belongings behind. Okay, why would they do that? Unless they needed to get out of town very quickly. And then they find out that he's got this outstanding warrant for assault and sodomy of a 15-year-old girl. Yeah. How are they not going to think that he's a very serious potential suspect?
Certainly does not look good for him.
No. Carmen's murder was still fresh in the minds of Rochester residents when the investigation into the murder of Wanda Walkowicz began. A separate reward of $10,000 was announced in conjunction with a flyer campaign and the launch of a new hotline. A witness came forward saying that on the afternoon Wanda disappeared, they saw her on Conkey Avenue, only about 350 yards from home. Wanda had been standing next to a large brown vehicle, talking to the driver through the passenger side. Unfortunately, the witness couldn't see the driver. Another witness claimed that sometime between 5:30 and 6, she saw a girl matching Wanda's description being forced into a light-colored Dodge Dart by a man on the same street. One thing that strikes me, Gibbs, is that in a lot of unsolved cases, police have nothing. Nobody saw anything. Nobody reported anything. In this case, they actually have a number of witnesses.
Yeah.
Who saw these girls. Now, these two witness statements are a little conflicting.
But you still have witnesses saying what they saw, what kind of vehicle it was. So we think with that information that they'd be able to weave something together.
Yeah, one witness says a large brown vehicle. The other one says a light-colored Dodge Dart, which I don't believe was a large vehicle back in the day. But it could have been two different vehicles.
Could have been.
So, at this point in time, we've talked about all three murders, but at this point in time, two young girls had been abducted and murdered in pretty similar circumstances. It was natural for the public to assume that these two cases were connected.
I don't know how you couldn't as somebody in the public, right? As you're reading this, you're thinking, same killer.
Yeah, same ages, essentially, very similar manner of rape, murder, ligature. How could it not be? But Rochester PD was skeptical that the two murders were linked in the early stages. I mean, I think for one thing, according to the Democrat and Chronicle, the vehicle which Wanda was said to have been forced into didn't match the description of the car from Carmen's murder.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between a Dodge Dart or this large brown vehicle versus the Pinto.
But I think to base your conclusion on that, you're assuming that a killer would only use the same car. That might not be the correct assumption.
No, you're exactly right. The killer could use any car.
Might have access to multiple cars.
Right.
We don't know. just over 6 months after Wanda's disappearance. In October 1973, a reconstruction of her abduction was aired on local television. A few tips came in, but nothing led to a break in the case. It was only a month, though, after this broadcast that Michelle Maenza was murdered. We mentioned that leaf debris was found in her hand. This led crime scene investigators to believe that she'd likely been killed in that location or not far from it, instead of being killed elsewhere and then dumped in this location. When police again appealed for the public to come forward with information, one witness reported that at around 3:30 p.m. on the day Michelle disappeared, they saw her sitting in the front passenger seat of a vehicle that was driving quickly down Ackerman Street, which then turned on to Webster Avenue. The witness described the car as a beige or tan color and said that Michelle was crying. Okay, so this is definitely not matching the Ford Pinto, but could possibly match the Dart.
Could be a lighter color.
Or the other brown car, depending on what you are calling brown, but more likely the light-colored Dodge Dart that one witness saw. We talked about Michelle's stomach contents. She'd eaten hamburger and onions not too long before she died. And this finding was put into context when witness reports came in from people who said they saw a girl matching Michelle's description with a man who was around 25 to 35 years old. The pair were seen at around 4:30 p.m. outside Carol's restaurant in Panorama Plaza in Penfield, about a 10-15 minute drive outside Rochester. Another witness told police that at around 5:30 p.m. the same day, he was driving through Walworth, a town about 25 minutes east of Rochester, when he saw a large beige or tan colored vehicle pulled over on Route 350. The car had a flat tire, but the witness saw something more concerning. He saw the man standing next to the vehicle grab a girl by the wrist, who the witness suspected to be Michelle. But unlike in the case of Carmen Colon, this time the witness pulled over to see what was going on. The man responded by grabbing the girl and hiding her behind his back. The witness, who was still inside his vehicle, tried to get a look at the other vehicle's license plate, but the man stood in front of it as he stared the witness down with this angry stare on his face. The witness felt so uncomfortable, he had the urge to get out of there. On both occasions, the man seen with Michelle was described as white with dark hair, around 6 feet tall, weighing about 165 pounds. He had a beard and long, dirty fingernails. He wore a blue or dark colored ski type vest and jeans tucked into a pair of brown cowboy boots with belt buckles on the side.
I mean, I'm glad the guy stopped. I think he should have got out of his car. I think I would have. But I mean, you don't know until you're in that situation, but I think I would probably got out.
Yeah, I mean, I view this one a little differently. The girl's not running naked down the street with a car chasing her in reverse. Now, you do have a man who is grabbing her by the wrist. That could be her father.
Could be.
You don't know the context of it. Are you going to get out and get your ass whipped when you don't know that this girl is in distress? You don't really know what's going on. I do view them a little differently, but I'm glad the guy at least pulled over, kind of checking on her. And like you said, you can make the argument that, yeah, do you wish he would have done more? Sure.
Yeah.
But again, I view the two situations as being a little bit different. I think in the first one, without a shred of doubt, you know something very, very wrong is happening.
Right.
In the second one, I don't think it's that obvious that something very wrong is happening. You know, it could be a child who is throwing a fit and a father is trying to corral them, for lack of a better term, or, get them back inside the car or whatever it is. But we do have some good descriptions, and they match, which I think is interesting. Investigators use these witness descriptions to release a composite drawing to the media of the man seen with Michelle. Again, another hotline was established for tips, and a reward was offered. Detectives decided to drive from Carol's restaurant to where Michelle's body was dumped. Along the way, they had pickup trucks collect anything off the side of the road, which could be considered potential evidence. So, I do like a lot of the things they're doing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they're doing a really good job of trying to find out what happened to the girls.
Well, by contrast, there's so many cases where you and I have to point out that, police didn't do much in the early stages or this or that. We're not seeing any of that here. I used to dread taking care of my lawn, but now I look forward to it. Sunday's lawn care products are quick and easy, and I don't even have to go to the store. Everything is delivered right to my door. Your yard is your personal oasis, so it deserves the best. Sunday helps you grow a beautiful lawn, control pests, and fight weeds without all of the toxic stuff. Sunday's lawn care is effective and super easy. Just go to sunday.com, put in your address, and their lawn analysis tool does the rest. This is amazing. They use soil and climate data to create a personal nutrient plan delivered right to your door when you need it. And Sunday makes all of their lawn care products with your family in mind. That's why they use ingredients that you can feel good about, like seaweed, iron, and molasses. But the best part is it really works. And Sunday is offering our listeners 20% off. Full season plans start at just $129. And you can get 20% off when you visit getsunday.com/unsolved at checkout. That's 20% off your custom plan at getsunday.com/unsolved. So we said after the first two murders, police were skeptical that they were linked. I think after the third murder, it was at that point that law enforcement couldn't ignore the similarities between the victims. Now, Carmen, Wanda, and Michelle didn't know each other, but they were all from Catholic families who were struggling financially. They all lived in Rochester's poor districts. According to the New York Times, each family was low income, and the victims didn't live in a traditional family. Carmen lived with her grandparents. Wanda was being raised by her mom following her father's death, and Michelle's family was living under two different roofs.
But I don't know if that's going to be a reason for them to be selected by this. If there's one killer, I don't know if that's a reason why that killer would have selected them.
No, I don't know that it would be either. But do you want to rule anything out? And I would say no.
No, you want to keep it all on the table for now, right?
It was said that each girl also had a tough time at their respective schools. All three of the girls had some degree of learning difficulties. They were bullied and socially isolated at school. Detectives explored the possibility that the victims were all targeted by someone on school staff or who would have known of the families through some type of community welfare organization.
But I can see where you can make the argument that someone might have known of the families through some type of community organization.
Yeah, I don't think police could rule it out as a possible way for a killer to gain access to his victims. Then you had similar circumstances under which each girl was abducted, and then you had the killer's MO. All the victims ran errands alone in their neighborhoods in the afternoon or early evening. A light rain had been falling in each instance. They were all raped, strangled, and then dumped near towns on the outskirts of Rochester. Whoever the killer was had relied on a vehicle to help him commit his crimes. I think in the minds of most Rochester police, one thing was for sure. They were adamant that both Wanda and Michelle, and possibly Carmen, had fallen victim to a serial predator. But despite interviewing over 800 individuals in total, detectives were no closer to identifying the perpetrator. So Gibbs, at the beginning of the episode, we mentioned that the media deduced that the first letters of each victim's name corresponded with the first letter of the location where their bodies were later found. So some media outlets called this the alphabet murders, but some dubbed the case the double initial murders. In the minds of the public, at least, this led to a belief that the killer was targeting specific children based on some type of personal information. According to the Democrat and Chronicle, some conspiracy theorists took it even further, claiming there was significance in the order in which the girls were targeted. Their first name initials were C, W, and M. Some have extrapolated this to be a sinister acronym for Come With Me.
This one here is a little bit of a stretch for me. I think if you try hard enough, you could make anything fit.
Yeah, I'm right with you, but I think it's what people do. They're trying to make sense of something.
Yeah.
And to your point, if you try hard enough, you can make just about anything fit, or you can make something out of anything. The one thing that popped into my mind was that it seems like a lot of trouble, a lot of work to send a message that someone might not pick up on,
Right.
or even if they did, they don't understand what it means. I don't know. The order of the initials is not what strikes me. The fact that each girl's first and last name starts with the same letter is much more striking to me.
Same here.
That would seem like such an unbelievable coincidence that a predator would just happen to select a young girl randomly, or three girls in a span of time, and their first and last names have the same letter.
And then to be found in a location with the same first letter.
Yes. And that on top of it, all of that is what I think to a lot of people makes this case so mysterious. But I don't know about the order and this Come With Me acronym. I'm kind of with you on that. The Salem News reported that while this theory is intriguing, there's nothing to suggest it's anything more than a freakish coincidence. If nothing else, because each of the abductions appears to have been opportunistic. For a killer to target someone specifically, the amount of time and energy they'd need to spend stalking their intended victim would only increase the likelihood they'd be caught. And I won't dispute that, but given the cases that we've done, I think we're all very well aware that predators do stalk.
They do.
Victims. And they do put time into that stalking, and they stalk very specific victims. Now, there are many opportunistic killers as well, but to rule it out just based on that, I don't think you can do that.
I don't think so either.
Now, maybe you could in the early 70s because some of that knowledge maybe wasn't as widely known.
But knowing what we know today,
yes,
you'd have to say, I don't think you can rule that out.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Now, not everyone is convinced that all the deaths are linked. According to WHEC News, some officers on the case believe that while Wanda and Michelle were killed by the same person, Carmen was abducted and murdered by someone she knew. And I think most people get it, Gibbs. For individuals who believe in the theory of two separate killers, Carmen's uncle, Miguel, is considered by many to be the prime suspect in her murder. We talked about it, right? We know Miguel purchased a similar vehicle to the one observed at the scene of Carmen's abduction, and that by the time police searched his car, it had been meticulously cleaned. You have him abruptly leaving for Puerto Rico after allegedly telling a friend he'd done something bad in Rochester. And then he went on the run when officers went to speak to him in Puerto Rico. All of that definitely looked suspicious, and it still does.
I mean, it doesn't mean he's a killer.
No.
It just doesn't look good.
I think it's impossible to say that he killed Carmen without any direct evidence, any forensic evidence linking him to her murder. But even if Miguel is one day found to be the perpetrator in Carmen's case, there will be no justice. In 1991, the 44-year-old took his own life after he shot and wounded his wife and brother. And you'd have to say that's another mark in the column of him being suspicious.
Yeah.
You'd have to say that he's capable of violence.
Sure.
Obviously, he shot and wounded his wife and brother. But in Carmen's case, you've also got James Barber, who was in Rochester at the time of the murder and was wanted for a similar offense. But again, like Miguel, there's nothing directly linking him to Carmen's murder. He too eventually died many years later. Now, if we're looking at people who may have committed all the murders, another suspect was 25-year-old firefighter Dennis Termini. According to the book Alphabet Killer, the true story of the double initial murders, from 1971 to 1973, Dennis raped at least 14 teenage girls and women in garages. This led him to become known as the garage rapist. At the time of the Rochester killings, Dennis also owned a light-colored vehicle that matched the description of the one seen by witnesses. He lived only about a half a mile from Michelle Maenza's school. But like Miguel, if Dennis was the killer, he'll never be brought to justice. On New Year's Day, 1974, Dennis tried to abduct an 18-year-old woman while threatening her with a gun. When the girl wouldn't stop screaming, Dennis fled and tried to abduct another girl. But by this point, the police were on him, and Dennis felt that the only solution was to take his own life, and that's what he did.
So another bad guy in the area.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I don't know if he had anything to do with these three murders, but there's no doubt that this was an evil individual.
Yeah, I know when they examined his vehicle, they did find some incriminating evidence.
They did, but again, it was circumstantial, but it's a little bit eye-raising. They found some white cat fur on the interior upholstery. They also found a map folded open to show the area where Michelle's body had been dumped. Now, an open map would show a lot of other areas too.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you're saying, oh, look at this.
It just happened to be on the map.
Right.
I don't think it was circled, or anything like that.
Right.
So, back to your point, where you're trying to make things fit, you can make it fit. Doesn't mean it's correct. That white cat fur is a little suspicious, but again, how many people own white cats?
I mean, I don't think you can just put it on that, right?
Well, it's why this case hasn't been solved. You got a bunch of individuals that, have done some bad things. They look suspicious, but there's just not enough there. Almost 34 years after Wanda Walkowicz's murder, police exhumed Dennis's body in early 2007 to obtain a DNA sample to compare against the semen found on Wanda's body. While it's been proven Dennis wasn't Wanda's killer, he can't be ruled out as the man who murdered either Carmen or Michelle. The problem is there was no DNA recovered from either Carmen or Michelle to allow for comparison. I think we also need to look at an infamous serial offender who was possibly linked after his apprehension for other crimes, Kenneth Bianchi, along with his cousin Angelo Buono Jr., was convicted of murdering at least 10 young women between 1977 and 1978 in Los Angeles in what was known as the Hillside Strangler murders. We covered them on an episode of TCAT, at least one, maybe two, I can't remember. So they were known for their murders in Los Angeles, but when the Alphabet murders took place, Kenneth worked as an ice cream vendor in Rochester. According to the Democrat and Chronicle, his job meant he worked close to areas near the scenes of Carmen and Wanda's murders. He also drove a car, matching the description of the one seen near where one of the victims was abducted. But Kenneth Bianchi has strongly denied committing these murders, and to date, there hasn't been sufficient evidence to charge him. One final suspect in the case is convicted murderer Joseph Naso. We covered him as well on an episode of True Crime All the Time. From 1977 to 1994, Joseph murdered 6 women in California and was finally arrested in April 2011. What made his crimes unusual was that, like the alphabet murders, Joseph's victims' last names each began with the same letter as their first names. Unbelievably, one of his victims was a 22-year-old woman named Carmen Colon.
Kind of interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. I think we talked about it when we did our episode on him. When you consider that Joseph lived in Rochester during the early 1970s, it seems a little bit more than just a coincidence.
You know, when we talk about this, about Joseph, about Kenneth, I mean, think about these really terrible guys, these terrible people living in the city at the same time, around the same time.
Sure.
It's just so unnerving.
It is. The Kenneth one, not so much. This Joseph Naso, and just the fact that, you know, his victims' first and last names had the same letters.
Yeah.
So strange. But the thing about Naso is that, at least in the case of the murder of Wanda Walkowicz, he's been excluded as her killer based on DNA analysis. He was convicted of the 6 California murders and is currently on death row. But I talked about it earlier. That would be such a strange coincidence for someone to randomly select victims and have their first and last names have the same letters. Here you have a guy who lived in Rochester at the time, later did this very same thing in California and was found guilty of it. And I do want to talk about the ruling out by DNA. I think I've said it before. It worries me sometimes, because to say that he couldn't have been her killer, I don't think that's correct. I think what you can say was that it was not Joseph Naso's semen.
Yeah, you could say that.
But how do you rule out the fact that maybe there was 2 people?
Right.
And one person raped Wanda and another person killed her.
Possible.
That's why I think you have to be careful by saying, well, we ruled him out.
Right.
Because his DNA doesn't match. Well, that most likely means he's not the rapist.
Right.
Or at the very least, he didn't leave the semen.
It doesn't mean he couldn't be the killer.
Exactly. And that's the thing that I worry about a little bit. Around 2009, there was a resurgence of publicity when the Democrat and Chronicle published updated articles on continued efforts by law enforcement to solve these murders. This sparked renewed interest, with numerous people calling in to provide new tips, but unfortunately, nothing was generated from these leads. We hear that all the time. It's kind of one of the sad parts about an unsolved case. You know, people want to help.
Sure they do.
And I'm glad that they're calling in tips. It stinks that they don't lead anywhere, but at least people are trying. As recently as March 2022, there's been another possible development. According to Newsweek, in March, a TikTok user named Alexis posted a video claiming her grandfather could be the alphabet killer. Alexis explained both her aunt and grandfather were good friends with Wanda Walkowicz. When Wanda was murdered, Alex's grandfather owned a grocery store where he kept cats to help keep the mice away. He also owned a similar vehicle to the one seen in Wanda's vicinity when she disappeared. Alexis claimed her grandfather also spoke to Wanda on the last day she was seen and was on the suspect list. Now, it's not known whether police have acted on this information or if they checked this guy out in the past and they've already ruled him out. We don't know. It's a pretty recent development.
Interesting.
So as we wrap up this case, Gibbs, it is one of the truly mysterious unsolved cases. 3 very young girls whose first and last names happen to start with the same letter. I do think that's one of the big things that, really grabs people's attention regarding this case. I'm sure it's also helped generate a lot of publicity and media coverage. But even when you strip that all away, you're left with the death of 3 very young girls. And not just the death. These girls were sexually assaulted, sexually violated, dumped. Just brutal stuff. Whoever did this, if it was one person, is a real twisted individual. There's no doubt about that. Like we say in some cases, if we're talking about multiple killers here, that's pretty scary as well.
Sure.
Because they're operating in the same vicinity, overlapping. Okay. Which means you got a lot of bad individuals running around. And we know there were, because we just talked about Joseph Naso and Kenneth Bianchi.
Scary, man.
It is a very scary thing. If you have information about the murders of Carmen Colon, Wanda Walkowicz, and Michelle Maenza, you can contact the Rochester PD at 585-428-6720. The New York State Police at 585-398-4100. The Wayne County Sheriff's Office at 315-946-5781. Or the Monroe County Sheriff's Office at 585-753-4178. So that's it for our episode on the Alphabet murders. We got some voicemails, Gibbs. You want to check those out?
Yes, hear them.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. It's Stephanie out of New Jersey. I am a longtime listener. I actually caught up on all of the true crime all the time, and I am now on Unsolved, and I love listening to how you guys developed over the course of the episodes. It's awesome. I listen to you guys all the time, but I did get into the HBO series, The Staircase, on Michael Peterson and Kathleen Peterson, and not that Gibby looks like Michael Peterson, but he looks like Colin Firth as Michael Peterson, which I thought was very weird. And then hearing him speak is also a little bit Gibby-ish, if that's the case. But anyway, long-time listener. Love you guys. Keep doing what you're doing. You get me through my work day, through my chores, and love listening to you guys. Take care. Bye.
All right. Love the voicemail. I actually just got done rewatching The Staircase.
Did you?
Maybe 3 weeks ago. I went on a thing where I was rewatching true crime docs that I had seen before. I forgot how many episodes.
There was a lot.
Between that and Making a Murderer, both of those have a lot of episodes to them.
Now you need to jump over to Prime and watch the Colin Firth.
Yes, I have not seen that yet.
Yeah. I know you like him as an actor.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I like him a lot. I don't really think you look like him, but I did get a kick out of that he sounds Gibby-ish.
Gibby-ish? Now I have to watch.
You might get your own what's that thing? Not the real dictionary, but the kind of slang dictionary. Yeah. I'm thinking there's a
Gibbyisms?
That might be in there at some point.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Gibby. It's Chris from California calling in, and I'm just catching up on your episodes. And I wanted to admit to something. I do buy DVDs occasionally, and I think I should just say out loud to the world, it's because you can't always find something to stream if you really want it. Sometimes that's the only way that you can see a movie that you're just dying to see. I love old movies, and a lot of times, and believe me, I'm on YouTube all the time. I have Amazon Prime, Disney, HBO Max, Netflix, all the things. And sometimes you just can't find the movie you want. And so you end up having to buy a DVD. I know. Anyway, I love you guys. Keep up the great work. This is just the best true crime podcast out there. I love you guys so much. Keep your own time ticking. Bye.
Man, I like old movies too.
Yeah, I do too. And I love her. I will say just about any movie you want, you might not be able to watch on Amazon Prime, but you can buy on Amazon. And then it goes into your library, and so you can just have it wherever you go.
But that little shiny disc is so cool.
I know, but why my wife threw out our DVD player. We literally don't even own a DVD player anymore.
I know, but I'm sitting here and looking at all these DVDs.
I got a whole wall full of them. I don't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
I need to take them to like one of those stores that give me $1 for them or something.
Put them on eBay or maybe somebody will buy them.
I'll keep them and wait for them to come back in fashion, kind of like vinyl records.
Yeah, that's true.
That someday, like when my grandkids are married,
yeah,
if I'm still alive, they might be worth something.
They're like, man, look at this collection. Yeah, it's good.
Grandpa's got the goods.
Yeah, he's got the good stuff.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Benji. I've been a fan of true crime all the time for a while. Love both the Mikes, the Gibster, Mike and Gibby. I was wondering if you guys could do maybe a couple episodes on some cults. Really like the cult, Heaven's Gate and all those ones. Maybe if you could do a couple episodes on that, I think that'd be hype. Love listening to your guys' voice. See ya. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, it's a great suggestion. I'm not sure which we would put it on.
I don't know. Cult of Personality.
I know that was one of your favorite songs back in the day. But no, I have been thinking that there would be some really good episodes around some of that. But I don't know. We could put them on either one, I guess, because
maybe
in some of them, there's not really even a crime. But it's just fascinating how things transpire.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not talking about Jonestown. Obviously, there's some horrific stuff going on there. But, Heaven's Gate, was there a crime committed?
I mean, they all agreed to.
Right. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think you could just put it on either one and tell the story. It's a fascinating story. There's no doubt.
For sure.
All right, buddy. That's it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
All this month, stream the funniest films for free on Pluto TV. Watch comedy classics like Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy, and Mean Girls. Or drop in for a Tyler Perry marathon with a Medea family funeral and Medea's witness protection. Pluto TV also has hundreds of channels and thousands of movies and TV shows like Get Shorty, Be Cool, Key and Peele, Comedy in Color, and more. And no contracts, no subscriptions, no fees, no joke. So download the Pluto TV app on your favorite streaming device and start laughing today. Pluto TV, drop in, watch free.